The core of Tropical Storm Hilary about to enter Southern California and pass close to San Diego as heavy rains continue to pound Southern California with numerous flash flood warnings, even some severe thunderstorm warnings, and a tornado warning or two has popped up. Meanwhile, on the Atlantic side, we've got Tropical Storm Franklin that developed rather quickly today in the Eastern Caribbean. We're going to be taking a look at that and what looks like a rather complex upper air that's developing across North America over the next 10 days. We'll see how it's going to be impacting both systems. In particular, though, how it will impact Franklin and other systems that are in the tropics, because all of a sudden in the Atlantic, it's gotten very, very busy. But we can look ahead, though, to a week, much of this week in the Northeast, to some nice weather with some changes in temperatures from time to time. That's all tonight on the Joe and Joe Weather Show, which is brought to you by Omni True Value Hardware at 1226 North Wellwood Avenue in West Babylon, New York. Whether it's mulch, topsoil, sand, or this winter it might be salt, get over to Omni. They are Long Island's largest rock salt source, by the way, and, of course, anything you need to make sure your home is prepared in case the East Coast gets a tropical storm or hurricane. 631-756-1125 is the phone number for the best prices in town, and as only Joe Rayo could say it, but he's not here to say it tonight. The website is omnitruevalue.com. And Tempest by Weatherflow. Get the revolutionary Tempest weather system, and you too can join the fastest growing weather network on the planet. The link is pinned to the top of the chat board. It's also on the descriptor to this video. And if you make this purchase or any other purchase on the Tempest by Weatherflow website, use the coupon code I want a weather station, because if you do, you get 10% off. And a great big good evening to everyone to tonight's Joe and Joe Weather Show. Joe is up in Vermont at Stellafane, which is the annual gathering of astronomer enthusiasts, space enthusiasts, I guess we can call them, as they stare up at the sky and check out the what's left of the Perseid meteor shower or anything else that's going on. Joe will be back with me tomorrow night at 7:35, because we're on Monday through Thursdays at 7:35. Usually Sunday mornings we're on at 11 a.m., although I am thinking now, seriously considering changing the Sunday show back to 7:35 to match up with the rest of the week. I'll let you know later on. Subscribe to my YouTube channel and you won't miss it. Turn your notifications on so you can join us here. And welcome to everybody tonight on the chat board, and those of you watching. Hope you had a great weekend. It's suddenly got busy in the Atlantic tropics, as we've been kind of hinting at this for the last few weeks. As quiet as it has been, if it's going to be the active season that has been predicted by some of the hurricane long-range forecasts that are out there, they better start developing soon, and when they do, you may go from having nothing to having 3 or 4 storms at the same time, and we've got 2 named storms and a couple of other disturbances. We have a depression out there as well, and a couple of other disturbances that pose the possibility of becoming a tropical depression or a tropical storm in the next day or two. So we're going to take a look at all of that. And, of course, we are going to talk about Tropical Storm Hilary, which is now the core of it. It's a little difficult to see on this satellite loop. I'm going to put the latitude and longitude on here so at least we can get some perspective, because the whole chunk of the southwest here is covered in cloud cover, and you can see that there are also lightning strikes that are going on as well. The California border on this satellite is, I'll draw it in, is right here. And the core of Hilary is about 40 or so miles south of that border, and San Diego is right about there, somewhere over here. So it's almost to that spot, and this is going to be the first time that I can remember where the core of a tropical cyclone intact and as a tropical storm actually made it into the state of California. I honestly cannot recall a single time where that's happened. They've gotten certainly remnants from tropical systems, or maybe remnant lows that have moved up there from storms that have moved up through the Gulf of California on the east side of the Baja Peninsula. But this is the first time that I can remember where there's where the actual core of a tropical storm is moving into the state of California, and they are absolutely getting pounded right now with rain. As you check out the latest radars actually, and I have it centered here in the southwest, and there's a little red box there that is to the east of San Diego, which indicates a tornado warning, and all those green boxes that are up are all flash flood warnings, and they are numerous throughout much of Southern California and actually pushing up into the Sierra Nevadas. This heavy rain is going further north and intact, and so you wonder whether there's probably going to be additional flash flood warnings that will go up in the northern part of the state. And that plume of tropical moisture, by the way, when you look at it on the satellite loop again, this goes all the way up. I mean, this cloud cover and moisture is shooting all the way up into Oregon and Idaho, and it's breaking records for tropical cyclones. Well, it already has in Idaho and Oregon. Not that I think that that was a high bar to reach to begin with there, but I mean, this moisture field is really quite impressive as it continues to stream on up toward the north. And with respect to the Hurricane Center's position, so the last advisory here was from 2 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time, so it was 5 p.m. Eastern Time, and there'll be a new advisory coming up within the next 20 minutes. It was at 31.3, 116.1 west, 110 miles to the south of San Diego, moving north at 23 miles an hour. So did a little math, and you come up with about 40 miles or so by the time they get to the new advisory. And you can see that the forecast track here by mid 11 p.m. tonight Pacific time. It is forecast to be in the southern part of the Sierra Nevadas, as still maintaining its core as a tropical storm. And then we have a remnant tropical depression being indicated by 11 tomorrow morning up in northern Idaho, right on the Oregon, Idaho, Nevada border. So it's one of those weird years, folks. Strange things are happening. If you think back to this winter in Southern California, the Weather Service offices in San Diego and Los Angeles issued their first blizzard warnings ever for the mountains in Southern California. Not that they don't get snow there, they do, but they've never had the opportunity to use a blizzard warning. And it came this past winter, so now in the same year, thanks to Timothy Veltman, by the way, for pointing this out. So in the same year, they've had blizzard warnings in a place where they've never had blizzard warnings before, and they've had tropical storm warnings up for the first time into Southern California. And you see that's outlined here in the area that's in blue. I want to let's go to the Weather Service forecast office here in San Diego first, and then we can go to LA and see what's happening here weather-wise, specifically at this time. And you can see the local radars. Here's the radar from San Diego with the heavy rain bands moving northward. The core is still to the south. Now there's not much going on south of the center now, as everything's pretty well shifted to the north side of the center. And you can see the green boxes here with all the flash flood warnings that are up. And the other radar that they have on here is the radar from Santa Ana, and that's further north, and you see heavy rains going on over Los Angeles, over Riverside, San Bernardino. All these places are getting just absolutely pounded. The Palm Springs as well, absolutely pounded by heavy rains some places the rain intensities are in excess of an inch or so an hour. Probably see some numbers higher than that before it's all done. In terms of specific observations, I don't know if they have what the other offices have, but let's take a look on the observations. Hopefully, they've got the EDD map. So I'm not seeing, at least from here, in terms of wind, there's really not a whole lot of wind. There's some 15 to 20 mile an hour winds well inland. And if you go even further west in toward the eastern part of the state, we've got some 30 knot sustained winds there. So it looks like there's some stronger winds well to the east of the circulation center in a small area. And I'm sure there's probably some local climo effects that are going on. It's just kind of odd because I'm looking at this one station, for example. So this is Chihulia, California, which has got a southeast wind at 35 miles per hour, gusting at 53. Was the peak gust in the last hour, 80 degrees. I assume it's raining there. But I could be. They don't see it listed there. And then you go up to a station called Nelan 1, where and this is might be because of the mountains or the canyons there. 78, but the wind there is northwest, which is kind of odd because we're talking about a place that's at least a couple hundred miles inland. So. Just a strange day all the way around. San Diego itself reporting light rain in the last hour, a south-southeast wind at 9 miles an hour. The barometer there is 2950. The direction of the wind is, as I said, is south-southeast. So the center is somewhere to the southeast of them. And then we go further up the coast. I just want to go to maybe around Los Angeles to Burbank, where we've got rain, moderate rain there, with a northwest wind at 9. So wind is really not the issue here when it comes to this tropical cyclone. This tropical storm. It's really been all about the rainfall. And with respect to additional rainfall amounts, WPC, remember, they've already had rain. So this is this was valid from 11 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time today through 5 p.m. Tuesday. So there's already been several inches of rain. So we still have areas here in the yellows, or an additional 4 to 6 inches forecast in the areas in yellow. And there's an area that's well east of Los Angeles that's got a red blotch there. That's 10 to 15 in that small blotch. So certainly the forecast for potentially catastrophic rainfalls was a correct one with in this particular situation. And also notice that they didn't even highlight an area of heavy rain in northeastern Oregon and into central Idaho. The light green is 1 to 2. The dark green area is 2 to 4 inches of rain. So it is again, it's remarkable to see something like this. Obviously, we don't see things like this very often. There have only been 2 tropical cyclones that have made a landfall in California. Now there have been others, as I said, but as opposed to say coming in from off the ocean and making a landfall in Southern California without touching. Not coming up through a landmass like this one, that's only happened twice. Once in 1939, and the only other time before that was in 1858. So exceedingly rare. Only the third time in 165 years, which basically makes it a once in every 55-year event. So, there's it might be your time. You may not see it again in your lifetime. Meanwhile, as we look at the U.S. satellite loop overall, you can see all the moisture in the west that's coming over the top into Idaho and Montana, even clouds that are streaming up into the Dakotas. And it's all getting pushed along by the Canadian part of the jet stream that lies right along the border. And these clouds are streaming eastward. So that's another thing here that's rather remarkable in terms of the satellite signature, is to see such a long distance plume of cloud cover coming from the eastern Pacific up the west coast and then right across the top of the U.S. Now, the stuff to the east is obviously high clouds, but again, it's still pretty remarkable to see the flow like this. Meanwhile, on this shot, I do want to point out one of those other disturbances that the Hurricane Center is watching is this area of disturbed weather in the eastern Gulf of Mexico, which actually to me looks like it's picked up a bit today. Looks like there's been an increase in shower and thunderstorm activity. There's a little bit of feathering going on with some of the clouds, indicating that maybe there's some kind of perhaps a mid-level circulation or a little bit of outflow that's occurring. So that's a system that the Hurricane Center is highlighting as possibly developing into a tropical depression or maybe even a tropical storm as we go through the next several days. This thing is going to be moving westward across the Gulf of Mexico and will probably head for South Texas Wednesday or Thursday. So that's an additional system to keep an eye on. Franklin is on the far lower right, just the northern edge of it is on this particular satellite loop shot, so you can't really see it yet. And we'll go back to Franklin in a bit. Meanwhile, the weather in the east was really nice today. The radars, even in New England, except for a couple of spot showers in Maine and in upstate New York, it was a very, very quiet day in New England, and the radars are quiet. This is really, think about it, in a summertime weekend, a summertime day in August, where there's no thunderstorm activity at all going on, except for a small patch on the Florida Panhandle. Now, it picks up a bit in southwest Florida from Tampa southward all the way down to the Keys. But on the whole, this is extremely quiet for a summer. And that radar is quiet all the way almost to the Rockies. You see the rain up in North Dakota, the rain in Montana, all of this from the tropical moisture from Tropical Storm Hilary as it moves along. And again, moving very, very quickly. So at least that's one bit of good news with this, is that the fact that this is not a system that came inland and just basically fell apart over Southern California, where it rains for days and days and days. This is going to play its course tonight into tomorrow morning. Gradually, the southern edge will shift northward since it is moving at about 25 miles an hour or so. So that at least is a plus. It does limit the upside. The problem is the upside is high because of the fact that this was a Category 4 hurricane at one point. The Storm Prediction Center also, kind of matches up with what's going on the radars. There's really nothing except for maybe a couple of spot showers up in Maine, and also along the South Carolina coast down to Florida. They've indicated the possibility of general thunderstorms, but it all seems to be in South Florida and then that little patch in the Panhandle. Meanwhile, in the southwest, we have a area of marginal risk covering much of Arizona, southwestern Utah, southern Nevada, and of course into Southern California, where it becomes a slight risk. And there's a tornado risk there of 2 to 5%. That's another thing we don't see too often, to see 5% tornado risk in that part of the country. But it's a 2 to 5% tornado risk. And these are going to be tornadoes that are going to spin up because of the tropical cyclone itself moving northward and setting off some tornadoes, these storms usually will do that. They usually don't produce tornadoes much beyond an EF0 or an EF1. Maybe every once in a while you get an EF2, but it's unusual for them to spin up tornadoes that would be stronger than that. Now, for tomorrow, SPC has actually a little area of general thunderstorm risk in southern New England, southeastern New England, back to central New Jersey and northeastern Pennsylvania. I don't think that this is with a cold front that's going to move through tomorrow evening and tomorrow night. And we've got so much dry air around, and there's dry air in the eastern half of the United States. So even though the dew points are going to come up tomorrow, they're not going to come up to any kind of ridiculous levels that the front will be able to work with to produce thunderstorms. I doubt that we'll see any. I don't even think we'll see a marginal risk being put up here. I think it's just a general thunderstorm risk, and I'm also thinking that those storms will likely be scattered in nature, few and far between, and that most folks will probably not see any. Still seeing a marginal risk from Arizona through Utah and up into western Wyoming and eastern Idaho. Also in parts of northeastern Minnesota to northwest Wisconsin and the western part of the upper peninsula of Michigan. And then when we move into day 3, area of marginal risk. This is Tuesday into Wednesday for South Texas. And this may be due to that system that's off in the eastern Gulf of Mexico by the time it makes it to the Texas coast. So I'm thinking maybe it's probably more like Tuesday night and Wednesday rather than earlier in the day Tuesday. And as far as rainfall is concerned over the next 7 days, and we'll give this a look, WPC is indicating 3/4 of an inch to 1.5 inches and maybe some 2-inch plus rainfalls. Certainly not going to come through the first part of this week anyway. In parts of Massachusetts and southeastern New England, we've got the 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch kind of snaking its way down to North and South Carolina. Florida, not that much except the extreme south, but it's even there, except, of course, being that it's convective, you certainly could wind up with rainfall amounts that are double what's being forecast. You see that there's several inches of rain being indicated for South Texas, again, due to that tropical system. And in the west, now, this is, of course, going to be front-end loaded to a large degree, given the fact that this covers the period starting in 5 minutes and going through a week from today. So this is on top of what's already fallen. Let's just call it several to many inches in parts of Southern California. 1.5 inch amounts also being indicated for parts of Oregon and Idaho, also into Utah and much of Arizona except for the southwestern corner of Arizona. Kind of getting a little bit of a dry slot here effect that's moving into southwestern Arizona as Hilary continues its track on to the north. Now, let's take a look at Tropical Storm Franklin, which is sitting in the eastern Caribbean, and it has gotten much better organized in a very short period of time. Hurricane Center was still carrying this as a wave at noon at 8 a.m. this morning with their tropical outlook, although they did indicate that it looked like something was developing there. And an Air Force reconnaissance aircraft that went in on the first pass found flight level winds close to 55 knots and a pressure down at 1,002 millibars. And it was very clear by the observations that were being coming back from the plane that there was a well-defined closed circulation. So this is a tropical storm. It's hard to see. It looks like the center, certainly the center looks like it's underneath all this convection that continues to burst there. There's a little bit of shear going on. You notice some of the cloud tops to the northwest are moving southwest to northeast. So there's a little bit of shear there, and that might slow development. Also, if you look to the right of the system, you see the clouds that are northeast of the northern Leeward Islands, and then there's a concentration of clouds. If you watch the loop closely, you can see the circulation center from the tropical depression basically emerge out from underneath those thunderstorms. There's a lot of shear going on, and that shear is being produced by the new tropical storm, the outflow, the strong westerly winds carrying the high clouds eastward. That depression is not going to be able to develop under these sort of circumstances. The center seems to be still there, the low-level center, but there's hardly any thunderstorm activity at all around the center. It's all been blown off to the east. So I think the new advisories should be out. So I will bring them up. We'll go to the Hurricane Center and see what's happening. Now, on the new outlook, before we get to the advisories, the Hurricane Center now has a red X in the eastern Gulf and says showers and thunderstorms have increased this evening, as we showed you on the loop, and are also becoming better organized, as we showed you on the loop, with a trough of low pressure associated in the eastern Gulf. Conditions appear favorable for development. The system is moving west at 15 to 20 across the central Gulf of Mexico. Tropical depression or storm is likely to form as it approaches the western Gulf coastline by Tuesday. Interests in the western Gulf, maybe my timing was a bit off when I mentioned earlier. I said maybe later Wednesday into Thursday, so it looks like it might be maybe later Tuesday night or something like that. Interest in the western Gulf should monitor the progress of the system. Watches or warnings may go up later on. So let's run to Franklin. The headline tonight is Franklin NOAA aircraft shows Franklin maintaining strength at 14.8 north, 67.8 west, moving west-northwest at 14, 1,001 millibars. So we've dropped another millibar in the pressure, and they're carrying top winds of 45 miles an hour. So as far as the forecast is concerned, now I would take this with a grain of salt because there are lots of things that are going on in the atmosphere right now over North America that I'll get into shortly. But this takes us through 2 p.m. Friday, and the Hurricane Center has a tropical storm turning northward toward the coast of the Dominican Republic and Haiti. And this is where we have tropical storm warnings that are up right now. This is liable to be also a very big rain producer. I don't think it'll strengthen. It doesn't look like it'll strengthen to a hurricane before it gets there, but it will be a big rain producer. And then depending on how it survives the trip, it'll emerge on the other side as probably a tropical storm or maybe a depression again, and then becomes a tropical storm because conditions in the southwest Atlantic are favorable for tropical cyclone strengthening. And they have it going to a hurricane by Thursday as it moves northeast. And then by Friday, it's south of Bermuda by about 400 or so miles, also as a hurricane. Now, it may not be done from that point in terms of where it's going, because I think there's some question in my mind, certainly, about what this thing is going to do. The reason for that is, as I said, it's a fairly complex upper air, and it'd be fair to just use the North America view here out of this. And just going back to the deep trough back on Thursday that swung through and, of course, set us up for the weekend that we had, both Saturday, which yesterday was spectacular, with low humidity and sunshine, and temperatures in many areas didn't even make it out of the 70s. Now, here we are for Sunday evening, and we still have this very strong ridge, upper high, that's sitting over the state of Missouri. It is creating very hot conditions in the middle of the country, from the Great Lakes southward, and of course across the south the heat continues. We still have, though, if you look, there's still a very relatively active jet that is coming down from Canada. The only thing that's happened here in terms of the overall pattern is that we've seemed to be having one of these relaxation periods where the northern jet pulls up, allows the ridge to build, and if you think back to about a week ago, a lot of the long-range guidance was indicating that this upper high was going to take over for this week, and that we'd be looking at perhaps a heat wave developing in the eastern part of the United States, particularly in the mid-Atlantic and up into southern portions of the Northeast, which really have not had a lot in terms of hot weather. It's been very hard to string 3 days of 90-degree plus weather. Now, the further south you go, you head down into Virginia, North Carolina, that's a different story, clearly. But from, say, central New Jersey and northeastern Pennsylvania, northeastward through New England, stringing 90-degree highs today for more than a day or two has been a real struggle. But what the models got wrong is the fact that the primary pattern that has been pretty much intact since late June shows no signs of breaking down. And in fact, when models sometimes in the middle part of a pattern that's sticking around for a long time will try and show the pattern breaking down only to revert back to the original setup. And that's really what's happening here. The upper high is going to build in for Monday, which is going to be the one hot day that we have this week, with temperatures that will be getting up into the for at least eastern Pennsylvania to southern New England, they'll probably be upper 80s and low 90s. And then we're going to see that ridge flatten out and begin to shift westward, because there's another trough. This time around, the trough, instead of coming down from the northwest, is actually strengthening out of this complex that sits from Alaska down into Labrador, right in here. And there's a ridge that in the Atlantic that is running up into Greenland that has been pulsating back and forth. So this area here in northern Labrador winds up strengthening and drives a trough basically along and just off the east coast. You see it there, that spreading area of blue. The upper high center still in Missouri, but will start to shift south and a little bit southward and then westward. Now, there's the trough by the end of the week is sitting right like this. Franklin is this system. So the question is, what does it do? You've got upper air steering winds that are going to be pretty much from west to east, not too far away from where Franklin is. The models, the GFS anyway, well, the European too, this is the point where the westerlies are about at its furthest south. And that trough starts to pull out. It's still trying to push eastward, but then if you look on the far right, this is another tropical storm that the models are forming from a wave that's coming off the African coast. So it really can't go east because of that system. And it's too far south now from the westerlies, so it's just kind of in a bit of a no man's land. You've got this upper high that's over here, back through Texas. Got an upper low that's sitting off the west coast that's helping to pin that ridge in between. So what do you do with this? Well, this is where it starts to get a little bit complicated. You've got another trough approaching the east next weekend. And Franklin begins to respond to that new trough as it moves into New England and extends down into West Virginia by moving northwestward. And you see it moving northwestward. The trough itself gets hung up right along the coast, right, or just inland of the coast, right about here. The trough gets hung up. Now, if taken literally, this to me would suggest that Franklin would turn northward, maybe pass not too far from Cape Cod, and perhaps head up to Nova Scotia or Newfoundland. And that's what the GFS is indicating, and you see it there. It lifts it up toward Newfoundland as more energy comes down from Canada and now drives troughing down into the southeastern part of the United States. And this is where you've got this other tropical cyclone that was well out to the east, starting to move west-northwestward in a very odd direction, and then eventually recurve because of the trough that's along the east coast. However, I'm going to swing over to the European now. And the European and the GFS are sort of on the same page for much of the time this week. It has the trough from Labrador, an upper low there between New Brunswick and Newfoundland, and Franklin is somewhere in here. The only thing is, the Europeans got Franklin pinned further south than the GFS does. That could be because it might be saying that the system might have some issues when it moves off the coast of the Dominican Republic. Maybe it'll be a little weaker when it does that, and it may just not gain latitude as the GFS shows, and the Canadians like the GFS. So I think that's certainly in the box as far as possibilities. The trough in the east is going to lift out, but where it starts to get a little different with the European, and I don't know if this is right, you've got this next trough that comes in next weekend. It's not quite as deep or as strong as the GFS has. And then the European has another trough behind it that suddenly digs down into the western Great Lakes and, kind of to the point at 240 hours. It's somewhere, Franklin is somewhere halfway between the North Carolina coast and Bermuda. Looking at this upper air, it would suggest to me that this would also ultimately result in a system that winds up going to Nova Scotia and Newfoundland because of the way the flow is. There's a southwest flow from New Jersey northward, so this trough would need to dig a little bit further to the west and make for a more of a southerly component of motion along the east coast, which, given that this is a 10-day forecast, it's not out of the question that the models certainly could be wrong in the depth here, in the positioning. We've had a few times in the last few weeks where these troughs were overdone. We've also had it a few times where they've been underdone. Sometimes they've been too far east, sometimes they've been too far west. It's hard for me to kind of pick out which way the models may want to go with this. And, the difference, it's also a difference in terms of how this evolves as far as the GFS is concerned. The other thing that's different with the European is that the European, if you recall back the middle of last week, we talked about there's a bit of a gyre of moisture over Central America. Well, the European generates a tropical storm in the Northwest Caribbean a week from today, and that it moves into the eastern Gulf of Mexico into Florida, getting ready to go into Georgia. Now, if that's correct, I mean, literally in terms of what this model is saying, if this upper air structure is correct and we do have another tropical system that's coming out from the Northwest Caribbean and it gets there with this type of flow, then if this is real, this would actually come up the east side of the Appalachians. But again, we don't know if it's real. The GFS has hints that there might be something there, but it doesn't go nearly as aggressive as what the European did. So I guess from that standpoint, obviously the only thing we can do is just sort of wait to see how things evolve over the next couple of days. But we know that there are a lot of working parts here. There's quite a few, because not only do you have the working parts of what's going on in North America, but you have the working parts of what's happening in the tropics themselves. And by the way, the Pacific, this is really no surprise, but the Pacific, which has been very active for the last several weeks, now that Hilary is up and moving into Southern California, the Pacific activity is going to shut down for a while. And you could see the atmosphere on both the Pacific side and the Atlantic side transitioning to where when the Pacific is quiet, the Atlantic is busy. And as soon as the atmosphere got to that point where conditions for additional tropical cyclone formation in the East Pacific was becoming more hostile, the conditions for tropical cyclone development in the Atlantic was becoming more favorable. And now, as I said, suddenly we have 2 tropical storms, 1 tropical depression, and 2 other tropical disturbances that show potential to become named storms at some point. So as far as the weather in the east is concerned, and particularly in the northeast, the weather front that comes through Monday night, you can see the GFS does absolutely nothing with it. We'll throw in for a stray shower or thunderstorm. Another high builds in from the Great Lakes into upstate New York, so the weather should be really nice for Tuesday, for Wednesday, and into Thursday. We're talking, highs in the upper 70s and low 80s. Nighttime lows that'll be in the 50s, except in the warmer urban areas and in the coast where it'll be in the low and mid 60s. I mean, just really, really nice for this time of year. The GFS also picks up, does have a low going into South Texas on Tuesday morning. Maybe it's a little fast. We'll see. But it does have a small system here with the pressure down to 1,006 or so. I mean, it could very well be a strong tropical depression or a low-end tropical storm when it does so and bring heavy rains to South Texas as it goes inland. Then the high goes out sort of rebuilds in eastern Canada. You've got a low that's coming across the plains with the next shortwave for Thursday. So this looks like one of these warm front, cold front deals for Thursday. So it will turn more humid before we get another front with some showers and thunderstorms late in the week, maybe Thursday night. And then that goes out, and you see that the front sort of gets hung up a little bit during the day on Friday. And then a big high for this time of year. This is a pretty strong high that builds in eastern Canada for next weekend. And you can see Franklin there on the right, not as far to the right as on the right side of the screen, right there, between looks like it's northwest of Bermuda, moving northward and then heading up toward Nova Scotia and Newfoundland. Again, there's much in flux here. The European the GFS's idea of the upper air is a little different. It kind of gets to the same place, but in a different way, where you get the trough at the end of the week. You see it there, but it does more with that. It kind of just leaves it hanging from New England down to Virginia, and it picks up Franklin, and then you get an arm that goes back into the Great Lakes and digs down into the southeastern part of the United States. By the time we get toward the latter part of next week. So this is for August 31st. So very, very, very interesting setup here. I'm just going to be curious. I'm going to be extremely curious to see how this all goes. And further along in the long range, whoops, didn't mean to do that. Further along in the long range, we still have. These troughs really want to keep coming into the eastern part of the United States, and this is September 5th. Back in July, I said that if we have that July pattern in August, we're going to get these cold fronts come through with nice dry air masses that are going to hang around for a while, and eventually they'd be on the coolish side. Well, if this overall pattern of wanting to put troughs in the east continues into the month of September, then those dry, cool air masses are going to be dry, and they're going to get cooler. So, we may escape this summer without getting a 3-day heat wave. In fact, it's August the 20th, and we're at the point now where getting to a 90-degree high is tougher and tougher unless you have the right upper air setup. And it doesn't look to me like, except for tomorrow, where we may go upper 80s and low 90s. It doesn't look to me like we're going to do it this year with respect to getting one of those 3-day type heat waves. Leon Probitsky hitting Super Chat. Thank you, Leon, for hitting the tip jar. And we also have John Leutman. I'm sorry if I butchered your name. I'm very sensitive about getting name pronunciations right because people have butchered my name all my life. So I really try my best. Leuch, Leuchtmann. John Leuchtmann. Maybe I'm close. But thank you. And I think you're new to the chat board, too, because I don't recognize your name. And Tom Contino, I have no idea about the winter, so just please, can we wait? I have 4 potential named storms on the map that I got my attention focused on. I think I really am going to spend my time looking at what the longer range patterns are. I wouldn't even if we didn't have the tropical storms. It's the end of August. We're in the latter part of the month of August. So, give it time. What'll probably happen is we'll have this pattern into November. Everybody will get excited, and then we'll go to a ridge in the east, and it'll be in the 50s all month through the month of December and January. I can't really show the videos, Miss Fowlerite, because of copyright issues. So I wish I could, but the damage there has been extensive. I have seen some of that video, and particularly some of the flooding. You got to remember, folks, there's a lot of mountains out there, and when it rains at the top of the mountain, that water's got no place to go but down. So if if you're getting 10 inches of rain. If you're getting ready to, 10 inches of rain on the mountaintop, all the way up the mountain, that water goes all the way down. The one thing I will say is, if there's one place you might want to be after this is all over, I know this is going to sound strange, but if there's one place you might want to be after this is all over, is Death Valley, because the rain. There are there are a number of plants, a number of flowers that wait for those rare rainfalls in those desert areas to blossom and bloom. And this, in fact, um, some of those seeds can remain dormant in the ground for years, even decades. Um, there's a plant called the resurrection plant. If you don't know what that is, Google it. In the desert, in the Sahara, the resurrection plant is can 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 go centuries without blooming, and it waits for that first round, that round of rain, and it will bloom and throw leaves out. You can actually watch it. It will. You can buy them. I saw them on Amazon. They're like $6 or $7, and you just wet them, and they in front of you they will move their branches and open up, and then within 24 hours or so they will produce a bloom, a flower that has a very short period of time to pollinate, and then it goes back into dormancy until the next rainfall, which in its world could be next year, it could be next decade, it could be 100 years from now. So that's called a resurrection plant. The resurrection plant. It's pretty cool to watch. So anyway, I think I pretty much covered everything that's going on. Oh, you know what? Since we're talking about updating this stuff, let's go to. I didn't update Hilary, so we might as well take a look at Hilary. Hilary, where are you? All right. So on the public advisory, let me give this a refresh. So at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern, 33.5, 116.7, moving north at 23, top winds at 50, 997. So it's now in Southern California, by the way. It's 25 miles southwest of Palm Springs. That's the center, the remaining core of Hilary, moving north at 350 degrees at 23 miles per hour. So it's moving at a pretty solid clip here, and they don't change anything with regards to the forecast map. So, and for those of you who just care, we have Tropical Storm Hilary, which is forecast to weaken over the next day or so at 20.2 and 39.4. Top winds are 50 miles an hour, moving west-northwest at 10, and you could see they weaken it to a depression, and then they have it as a remnant depression moving northward along 50 west, right in the middle of the Atlantic, and not doing anything. But again, that system being out there is keeping Franklin from once it turns to the northeast. It will only be able to get northeast so far because that system, Emily, is in the middle. And the tropical depression is still there. We didn't talk about it. This was at 5 o'clock, so this is not being updated. Depression steady despite strong westerly shear. I mean, to me, it doesn't really look all that healthy on the satellite loop. And they have it gone by 2 a.m. on Monday, so they're forecasting it to pretty much fall apart. And considering what's going on to the east, we've got Franklin there, and that is keeping. There's no way that system's going to have room to develop. I just want to check. Let's just see with. This is L8, potential tropical cyclone 8. He has it listed in, but they've already made it a tropical storm. I just want to see if they have the models. The global models are back. This is from 18. This is already different from what they had when it was not being considered as a closed system. So, they all turn it to the northeast, but there are a few of them that are kind of, more. There are a few of these that are on the western side of the cluster, and that might reflect what the European is doing. The UK XI, which is a UK Met model, is also further to the west and slower. So, the other thing to consider is, what's it going to do? I mean, is it going to move at a pace that gets it out to match up when these troughs are along the east coast or not? So I think I think with this one, at first glance, you might look at it and say, okay, this really kind of looks like it's just going to, cross the Dominican Republic, get out into the Atlantic, and then, go out. I think the Nova Scotia Newfoundland idea is reasonable considering the pattern that's being indicated. We'll see if it becomes more complicated. And here's just looking at the latest. This is the latest recon that's there. You've got 3 fixes. This was at just about 20 of 8, so it's pretty recent. It's 40 or so minutes ago, where they have it down to 1,001. Actually, the pressure on the second fix was 1,000. The green wind barbs, the dark green wind barbs, are 34 to 40. The yellows are 45 to 50, and there's a couple of orange wind barbs there that are between 50 and 55 knots. And if we take a look on the graph view from the recon aircraft, you can see the 1,000 actually down to about 1,001, and the SFMR wind speed and rain rates were pretty high. So, they were up there. The rain rates were up near the top of the chart. The wind rates, a bit lower. And you see flight level winds here like around 40 knots. Then they sort of drop off a little bit when they got close to wherever the center is. And then, with peaks and valleys. So I guess it depends on what rain bands they were flying through. So anyhow, I think that pretty well covers it for tonight. Right? I really don't have much else to say. I've done 55 minutes all by myself. I haven't done 55 minutes all by myself in a long, long time. Okay, so the Joe and Joe Weather Show, which tonight was really just the Joe Show, but you know what? Joe's my partner in crime, so I have to acknowledge him even when he's not here. It says so in his contract. The Joe and Joe Weather Show was brought to you by Tempest by WeatherFlow. Get the revolutionary Tempest weather system. Join the fastest growing weather network on the planet. The link is pinned to the top of the chat board. It's on the description of this video. The coupon code is I want a weather station, and you get 10% off. And Omni True Value Hardware at 1226 North Wellwood Avenue in West Babylon, New York. 631-756-1125 is the phone number. In case we get a tropical storm or hurricane, might be a place to go, or if you need a new generator or anything else you need to get you through a tropical system. They've got the best prices in town. The website is omnitruevalue.com. Brandon Doherty, thank you for hitting Super Chat tonight. Thank you for banging the tip jar. And also to Leon Probitsky and John Leuchtman. Thank you. Thank you for hitting the tip jar. It's most appreciated. We get to eat another day. And we will see everybody tomorrow night at 7:35 p.m. Eastern Time. Joe Rayo will be back. I will be here. Have a great night, and we'll see you tomorrow.